Hey guys, for those of you who don't know, May 3rd is a very special day for the Launchpad podcast. In fact, this day, 2017, we released our first episode. It's a birthday. So happy birthday to the Launchpad podcast from us. We want to thank all of our listeners who have been with us on this incredible journey. 6 years we've been doing this podcast. We've been having so much fun, some incredible guests. More to go. We're not slowing down, but we've picked up a lot of friends and a lot of listeners along the way. So, even though it's our birthday, you're kind of the ones who made it happen. So thank you so much. Thank you so much for listening. And thank you so much for interacting with us and reaching out to us on our YouTube and our social media. And we really appreciate you guys. So, yeah, thanks for listening. And for those of you who came on day one, like the four of you who listened to our first episode, we appreciate you guys so much. So thank you. Launchpad Podcast. Now let's get on with the show.
All right, welcome to the Launchpad Podcast. I'm Aaron. I'm Matt. Matt, what are we going to talk about today? Oh, we're talking about Scream 6. Oh, okay, that's going to be fun. All right, remember all that. You got to know that business. Like and subscribe on launchpadpod.com. All right.
You mind if I do it? I mean, that was pretty good, but do you mind if I do it?
I mean, but can you please do it the same voice and the same inclination and stuff? Intonation.
I think I'm purposefully trying not to do that. Can I do it? Can I do it poorly? Can I do a bad job?
Yeah, you're your own boss. Don't ask me for what you can do.
Hey guys, follow us on social media. That's what we're doing now. That's what we sound like. Follow us on social media: Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Launchpad Pod. And our website, launchpadpod.com. Hit like and subscribe. Tell your friends about us. We got a lot of new listeners now. Thanks, guys, for sticking with us. Today, a 6th film in a franchise discussion. Pretty exciting. Not too many movies even make it that far. So when a franchise...
I was thinking a lot about that.
Make it to 6. We're talking Scream 6, of course. The new Scream iteration just came out on digital, so time to talk about it, because Matt and I don't get to go to movies. What are you, the young people? God. Yeah, talk about Scream 6. What do you guys think of it? Let us know on that social media. But till then, let's get on with the show.
Ignition sequence start. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. All engine running. Liftoff. We have a liftoff.
All right. Welcome to Launchpad Podcast. I'm Aaron.
And I'm Matt.
Well, Matt, today we're talking about Scream 6. Ghostface takes Manhattan. We're excited.
Does he?
I mean, he took Manhattan more than Jason did.
He took an apartment in Manhattan. He took an apartment, a ladder, arguably an alley, a subway,
a bodega. I mean, that's pretty New York centric. I mean, he didn't storm Times Square, but like...
Neither did Jason. Jason walked through it.
Yeah, and everybody was like, whoa, Jason, yeah. It was pretty great. I mean, he took Manhattan more than Jason did. So still to this day, I think the only monster to take Manhattan is Godzilla.
Cloverfield.
I guess Cloverfield too. Good call.
Well, I just realized something. I heard about this movie as Scream in New York, but all of the print media that I physically saw with my eyes said Scream. And the M at the end of Scream was drawn in a way to have the Roman numeral VI in it, which I think is pretty cool. I thought
it was very, pretty neat. Very good graphic design. Good job.
That actually sounds more like you're watching, what would that be? Seal? Skrill? Yeah, it'd be Skrill 6. But no, like that was cool. And I guess when you say Jason Takes Manhattan, which was the title of that film, right? That's what they called it. Friday the 13th, Part 8, Jason Takes Manhattan.
I'm envisioning a King Kong-sized Jason climbing the tower, climbing the Empire State Building and just fucking dudes up with a giant machete. That's what I want, but that's never going to happen.
Who would be the little girl? The Fay Ray. Is that what her name?
Yeah, who would be his Fay Ray?
His mother? His mother, right?
Just
in a
her
little
head.
sweater.
Just her head.
Just boop, stuck on top of the Empire State Building.
Like a little olive on a toothpick.
Well, I was thinking, because the whole time I was watching Scream 6, I was like, this arguably could be any other location. They're not showing any New York, like they're not making it a New York centric thing, which then I think about, I guess if they calling it Scream or Scream 6, you don't owe me any New York, because you're not in the title. When you say takes Manhattan, you are making New York part of the deal. When you just say Scream 6, okay, it doesn't matter if it's in New York.
What part of New York didn't they give you? You got a subway, you got a bodega, you got apartment buildings. Generally, that's what New York is.
That could have been many other cities.
Are you the type of guy who goes to New York? You're like, I want to see Times Square. I want to go to Coney Island.
Stabbing people on top of like the Statue of Liberty crown. No, but I feel like
you want to see the tourist greatest hits. Like, I mean, they went to Central Park. They were on the subway.
I feel like Jason Takes Manhattan takes place and was made in a different time frame, right? Like the New York, especially the Times Square, let's just say, of that era New York is different than what we know now.
So I feel like this hit a bunch of New York staples. What is missing? Like, what would have added it? And you're like, he went to New York. He got a pizza at Gino's. He got some subs. He went to Chinatown. Like, what did you need him to do to make it New York centric?
Hey, taxi. Yeah, I guess that would have been. Well, like, what makes this more New York than, say, Chicago or Boston or whatever? Because, like, Boston has an underground transit system, and this one, there was nothing New York about that subway. It was just a subway, and subway, yes, is a New York thing. But I'm not. I guess what I'm saying is I'm not complaining about that, because any other movie that takes place in New York, unless it has New York in the title, you don't owe me any New York. You could just take place there, and that's what this movie did.
I think you could say that about any movie in any city. Like when we're in, like, people would complain that Candyman doesn't take place in Chicago. No, they literally say it takes place in Chicago. It only works in Chicago because Cabrini Green is a famous housing complex there. But like, I guess I don't know. I guess
like Candyman takes place in Chicago, and it has some Chicago things in it, right? Specifically, that one location
doesn't go get deep dish.
Well, but it's not called Candyman is in Chicago. If the movie was titled Candyman Fuck Chicago Up, I want to see him fucking up some deep dish. But if it's not in the title, you don't owe that to me. Does that make sense? I might be wrong, but that's what I'm saying.
No, I hear you. This isn't you're not alone, and I don't necessarily disagree with you. It was very much like they could have filmed it anywhere. You know, it being in New York isn't central to the plot, other than that's where they moved to. And it's a different location, regardless of whether you believe it's New York or not. They could have filmed in Vancouver. Who gives a shit? It's a different location than we've ever seen Ghostface go to.
Yeah, and it was cool, and it definitely worked. And like I said, the fact that the subway, the subway scenes were not shot in such a way where you're like, oh yeah, that's New York. The architecture or the streets. But it doesn't matter, because that was not essential to the plot. That was not promised to me in the title. And the movie was cool. And it was the first kind of urban Ghostface we'd seen in this way. And I thought it was, for the sixth movie in a franchise, it was fine. What did you think?
Here's what I'll say. For the sixth film in a franchise, it had great set pieces. Whoever wrote this, the people that wrote this, the committee that wrote this, they know how to write interesting ideas. The ladder scene I thought was cool. I thought the subway scene was pretty damn effective. I thought that was cool. Mm-hmm. I really liked the movie theater fight was good. There were things they did very effective. Our first kill. Here's a good example of what my point is, though. You have good set pieces and good ideas, but like a 24-hour film marathon, when people get together to do a 24-hour movie, you're given things that you have to use. You got to use a tea kettle, guys, and ice. And you have to figure out how to work that into your story. I feel like these guys were like, hey, we have these really cool ideas. Could be in any slasher movie, but they're cool, right? We're trying to make them city centric. Great. You have to have the scene where they explain the rules.
Right. Yeah,
and you're
yeah,
like,
yeah.
oh my God. So, and you got to have this opening kill that has to go this way. And they're like, okay, well, we're going to put a twist on like, okay, but you got to get back to the original thing first. And you're like, all right, it had to hit certain beats.
Sure.
Those beats drug it down. Scream 6 was brought down by the scream of itself. Like, literally.
I think that's true. And I felt the same way about Scream 5, which I admit I don't remember a shit ton of. Wait,
No.
was Scream 5 the one that had the boy in it from 13 Things that I don't remember, or whatever that show was called?
He got stabbed in the face and it was a really good, or in the neck, and it was a really good kill, and that was the best thing I remember from the movie.
That was the one that kept teasing in his kitchen. He kept opening the refrigerator and closing it.
That's
that
the best scene of that.
right?
Yeah, that was the best scene in that movie for sure.
That movie was fine, but I agree with you big time. They were screaming so hard that it was like, just let the movie go. You were doing fine. You don't have to remind me that I'm in the Scream franchise that hard. I mean, I get that's part of the thing, but it's almost like putting two mirrors against each other. It just becomes so self-reflexive that it's like, whoa.
And I think that it's really hard, and they're trying desperately to like have new characters. Okay, cool. But if I didn't care about the characters from the last movie, they're like, well, you better care about them now. And they did a better job about making these characters likable in this film. Like I felt they did a better job, but they were like, hey, remember these people from the last movie? And I was like, honestly, I don't.
I don't, yeah.
So
then they bring out Hayden Panettiere, and you're like, wait, which one? Was she in one of the... I know she was in...
She was in Scream 4. She was in Scream 4, which is my...
That was the first one she was in?
Yeah.
Okay.
She was only in Scream 4. Yeah. One and done. And okay, you're like, all right, I guess. But here's the thing. In our first kill, we have Samara Weaving. She's at a restaurant, and she does the first phone call, and she's lured down the alley in a pretty effective...
Love this whole sequence. I love the phone call. I love the way it's played out.
Yeah, really effective. Well done. And then she gets sharp. And in that stabbing, then the Ghostface leans down into her and pulls his mask off. And I was like,
yeah,
what?
I thought that too. I was like, get the fuck out of here. You're revealing the killer in the first scene?
Flash Thompson's the killer?
Yeah.
From the new Spider? I was way into that.
I was like, too. I loved it.
Because look, several films that I can't remember off the top of my head. Maybe you can help me. Maybe our audience can help us. Have revealed the killer early as a gimmick to then keep you strung along through the whole movie to try and figure out what's going on. It usually happens in thrillers, and it's like that takes a lot of gumption. That takes a lot of storycraft to be able to pull that off and to keep it interesting. This movie immediately was like, oh, that's a little too big for our britches. We're going to dial that back and kill him immediately. You could have kept that going for a lot longer than they did. It would have been interesting to have killers that you think these are the killers, but then more kills start happening and the two roommates are blaming each other. Wouldn't that have been interesting?
Yeah, you're right. Like, actually, there's your movie. That's what the movie should have been.
It should have been following two Ghostface wannabes and bouncing back and forth between them and our main characters. The whodunit of it all is which one of these roommates is doing the killing and which one is trying to kill the other, and framing them, and the paranoia of their relationship breaking down. That would have been an interesting movie. That would have been really twisted and pretty fucked up. And I loved in his apartment. He has a last podcast on the left poster.
I saw that, and I was like, man, I hope that's my goal. Is I want someone to have a Launchpad podcast symbol in their sixth movie in a franchise.
Yeah, right.
So that the next generation of know-it-all douchebags on the podcasts could be like, hey, did you notice the Launchpad podcast in the Halloween 14? Except I did like it. I did. It wasn't as close to Halloween 22 as I thought it was.
Yeah, except this was just called Halloween again. They just called Halloween. It's like Halloween 20.
They just put an accent over the E for no reason.
Halloween. So that was cool.
But wait, can I explore part of that for a second?
Yeah, please do.
I love that. I loved that they pulled that mask off, because in a double reflexive meta moment, I was like, fuck, They are subverting all expectations by doing something that none of the movies have done before. And they're telling me now, and I immediately was like, well, what are you going to tease along for the rest of the episode, the rest of the movie then? Because you've shown me something that we usually is a reveal at the end. I was so into it. And then I was like, then he gets home and he gets a phone call from the real Ghostface. And you're like, oh, I mean, still fine. But let me ask you this. I love your idea for the two roommates. And they're blaming each other and the paranoia that spirals out of that. Do you need to have any of the Woodsboro casts in that movie? Or can it just be a completely different cast in the same universe? Or do you need someone or something from the old movies to tie it in?
Producers in Hollywood think you need it.
Obviously.
This is where I say you don't. I don't need Luke Skywalker to ever be related to another Star Wars movie.
I was just going to say that.
Again, I don't ever need Leia. I don't ever need a Yoda. I don't ever need to find out where Boba Fett got his armor from. I don't need any of that. Just tell me stories that are completely unrelated, completely 100% untethered to the original material, because at this point, the original material is dragging it down. Period.
And in this case, you know, you're talking about like Star Wars, right? And that's exactly what I was going to relate it to, is you have this new Star Wars trilogy, which I think is fine, but it's not good. And I think the main thing about it that keeps it from being good is you're trying to tell different or the same stories with different characters, but the same characters. Get the fuck away from it. Give me one about a bounty hunter. Give me one about a resistance guy, his calling to the resistance. That shit is interesting enough. And you have literally a galaxy, right?
What is the best Star Wars show that's been out? Andor. It has nothing to do with Luke Skywalker.
Right. And you don't need it to, right?
Nothing.
When you think about Scream and the Scream universe, the in-franchise, the in-canon universe, this has now been a series of real, you know, in the context of the films, murders that they've spawned a horror movie franchise, which is a compounding thing of the more movies they make, the more they inspire these murders, the more murders they have, the more movies they make. You can keep adding on to that building in that universe forever. So why couldn't you have a movie, like you say, that got two people who are inspired by the real murders / the movies, and they're doing something wherever the fuck they are, New York or not, somewhere that's not Woodsboro. We certainly don't need characters who are descendants of the first film. I don't need a direct tie that bad. Just the fact that a copycat murder happened in Woodsboro and involved people is fine. You don't even need that, but like, fine. Why does it have to be Billy Loomis's daughter? Like, I get that you're trying to make it, is it in the blood? Is she going to be a killer? But like, no, she's not.
Except she is. She's killed like 7 people now.
All in self-defense, and they were all bad people, and she does it in a final girl protagonistic way.
Sure. Yeah, but she's murdered a lot of people now.
At no point, all people in this movie are like, you're a murderer. Did you murder? Do you like murdering? And Billy Loomis keeps coming up to her in those little visions and, kill for me. Don't you want to kill? No, she hasn't any of the time we've known her. We don't really care about that storyline. Why would she want to kill? You're trying so hard to make this something that is like a will she, won't we? Well, will she, won't she? The answer is she won't. She hasn't yet.
Here's what Hollywood thinks Scream is about Woodsboro. Scream is about it can be anybody. They're in a ghost face mask, and Roger L. Jackson does the voice. That's all you need. Those are 3 components. It's like, it's a whodunit. And I think there was an element of it being very meta and like a commentary on horror when the first one came out. Guess what? I don't think you need to do that anymore. I think you can make self-referential ideas to movies and draw on things that are references to movies and have people be aware of movies and be smart because of the movies they've watched. But the shoehorning the Randy speech into every one of these films, here are the rules. No, stop that, because it worked in the first movie. It doesn't work anymore. Guys, we're in a franchise. That's stupid. Instead, talk about horror movie franchises but don't try to shoehorn it into what you're doing specifically.
Well, if you just write it a little bit tighter, you could have the same information presented to the characters and to the audience. Just don't make it on an Apple box speech.
Yeah.
Right.
That felt so shoehorned in the worst way. And like, I have nothing against that character, the Randy nieces or whatever. But like every time they talked, I was just rolling my eyes because they're like, this is like what happened. But they didn't mention any movies that like, this is what had happened in. The original Randy was a video store nerd who kept talking about movies and being like, this is like that. He didn't say, we are that. He's like, he was making comparisons to the things he had seen. And this movie was like, this is that, but then didn't actually name any movies that did this properly. Like, just, oh my God. And later we'll get into that. Anyway. Yeah. There's this whole thing. Yeah, go ahead.
Something good that you just said.
Yeah.
You said all you need, and you listed two things, and then you said Roger Jackson. Roger Jackson does such a good fucking job. Like,
always.
The character. So the beginning scene of this made me think of that first phone call. It's supposed to, right? But the first phone call to Drew Barrymore in the first one.
Yeah.
And he's kind of charming in a way in the beginning of that phone call to Drew Barrymore. Because he's kind of flirty. He's kind of talking about horror movies. He's disarming. And then he gets a little weird and then he gets hardcore creepy. And I feel like that's how this, I'm sorry for this date. I'm kind of lost. I didn't want this to be my first impression. What does it look like? I don't see red. Do you see red? I thought that was a good buildup and I like that too. And then when Roger Jackson takes over, the way he talks, even when he's not being threatening Ghostface, when he's just like, at this point now in the sixth movie, we know when you hear that voice, right?
Yeah.
But when he is, it's just so, it is, I would say his voice is as recognizable and straight to the vein as the mask itself, right?
100%.
It's that important. And we've talked to him before. We've had him on the show before. We might have him on the show again soon.
Ooh.
Nudge, nudge.
Wink, wink.
Did you, as someone who knows him and has talked to him and has someone he's talked to you, Rumi, in the Ghostface voice.
I've gotten a Ghostface call, yeah.
For those of you guys who haven't heard, we have it's from years ago. We had a 2-part episode where me and Aaron run down the Scream franchise at that point. And I met Roger Jackson, and who's the voice of Ghostface, the actor who plays Ghostface's voice. I had him call into our show, and Aaron didn't know that I was going to do that.
Oh, it was
and
one
I was
of the best
texting Roger Jackson about what shirt Aaron had on, his dog's name, other stuff in the apartment. So it was like, dude, wasn't it like being in the fucking movie?
I honestly had a moment of fear. Like there was a moment of just like,
is Matt trying to kill me?
The fuck? It was so good. It's the best prank ever to have been pulled on me. Next to
the best one I've ever done, I think.
Next to an arf arf arf, good arf arf arf. But yeah, this is a good. This beats that out pretty heftily.
But it's just so cool, and like literally, you have the guy who played Ghostface calls. Yeah. And he's fucking with Aaron and he's asking him why he's wearing a Jason shirt. And I'm watching Rumi like look around, try to figure out, because you knew instantly it was him, right? It wasn't a sound alike. It was him.
It was just, him. Yeah.
It's so fucking surreal when I watch this movie now to be like, oh, I talked to this guy on the phone recently. And it's just so weird.
It's so bizarre, and he does it the best. And here's the thing: when you talk about all the iterations of Scream that come, Scream the TV show, their huge mistake was the mask. That was a big mistake. They did some different masks. Season 3 came back with the mask. But they did all the other ideas. They got out of Woodsboro. They got a whole new cast of people. They had a lot of the elements. They had the voice. They had the phone call, but they just didn't have the mask. Okay. But they tried and they did something different with it. And some people like the show. It's not for everybody, but some people do. But I give it credit for trying. Something that was in the TV show that they put into this movie, when they get to the movie theater, that's like the museum for Ghostface. Mm-hmm. There's these pictures drawn of the death scenes.
Yeah.
And in the TV show, there was the killer was drawing the pictures of the people who were dying, and they might have used the same artist. It was definitely trying to emulate that style from the TV show, which I thought was a really cool nod.
Was it supposed to be specifically as if that the guy collecting all that stuff at the end of Scream 6, he had collected stuff from the TV show? Like, is that tying the universes together?
No, I think it was just drawn images of the deaths from those, like, from the stuff he had collected. But the drawn images were of that style and potentially by that same artist. I cannot confirm if it was the same artist, but looking at it, it was like, oh, damn, that's pretty cool.
But either way, a cool visual tie.
A visual tie-in for sure.
Yeah.
So like when we get in, there's the two sisters, they're in New York, and the older sister, the internet thinks she is a murderer. And this internet truther thing I thought was a very cool idea that was underutilized. And I want to pitch the ending to you later. But all these people are like, we know the truth. And in today's age, the internet is so wild and dangerous because people are idiots and nobody does any research into truth. And anybody can be like, nuh-uh. And people will say, oh, well, it must be true then. Wild to me. The death of truth has been a wild turn for us, in the past, 5 years?
Yeah.
So the internet is stalking this woman. She finds out her sister's at a party. I'm not going to get super detailed with a lot of this, but at the party, one of the roommates is dressed as somebody from a movie called Murder Party. He's dressed as a cardboard knight, but it's from a movie called Murder Party, which is a pretty good movie.
Did you think that was this? Because I thought the same thing, but I thought it was not supposed to be a tie to that. I thought it was just cheapo, non-registered trademark costume. You think it was specifically from that movie?
It was 100% specifically from that movie because he has the horns on the side.
This is the same helmet. Yeah, I did notice that. I did notice the similarities, but I didn't think it was a call out to it. But
it's pretty cool though. And if you haven't seen Murder Party, it's pretty cool. It's people send out an invitation and hope a stranger will show up so they can kill him. And this guy shows up in a cardboard knight costume and he ends up killing all of them. It's kind of fun
movie. It's almost like one of those, I wish I thought of that movies, right? Because it's like you could make that movie. It didn't have a huge budget. It wasn't like a very big studio produced picture or anything, but it's a clever little fun film. Yeah.
So then as things keep going down, Ghostface shows up. He starts calling him. There's a really cool
see Gail
scene.
A couple times, right? So
We
Gail's
see Gail
in
a
the
few
picture.
times. Yeah. There's one of my early scenes at the bodega I really like. They go into a little, convenience store in New York. They call them bodegas, and Ghostface follows them into the little convenience store and starts stabbing the shit out of people.
Yeah. Just stabbing through people to get to the sisters.
And the owner pulls out a shotgun and he tries to kill Ghostface with it. And Ghostface comes up, takes it from him, and blows his head off. And it's the first time Ghostface, uses a gun outside of
in Ghostface.
Yeah,
Did he use it as Ghost? I'd have to look that up to see if I was right.
In some of the final scenes, he has a gun, they have a gun, she has a gun. A gun is being thrown around in some of the final.
But usually by then the mask is off, right? And we know who the killer is.
Yeah, exactly. But this is the first time, a shotgun. Look, that scene is good. That's a good scene. They're crawling around on the floor. They're hiding. I
feel like it's very
them.
It's different, that scene, right? Because the scene starts with the sisters outside and they get a phone call and it's Roger Jackson Ghostface voice. And they're like, well, we're not afraid of you. And he says something like, well, why are you alone? Or something like that. And they turn around and there's a guy in a Ghostface mask and they push him and he falls over a bicycle. And I was like, oh, this is a red herring. That's just because it's Halloween. It's right around Halloween. And for some reason, everyone in quote unquote New York is dressed up multiple days. So they push this guy over a bike and then they run away. And I was like, oh, this is a red herring. That Ghostface, hey, and he chases him. And I thought it was going to be some guy. I was like, what the fuck you pushing me for? He bursts into the bodega after them and just some guy in the line is like, yo, you got a problem? And he just starts fucking stabbing him. He pushes him out of the way, stabs another guy, and the girls are scrambling to get away. And the bodega owner's like, go out the back door. They try. They can't. We need the key. He pulls out the shotgun. Once Ghostface blasts that guy with a shotgun, they're hiding on the floor, and he's looking for them while shooting the shotgun at different things. And I guess, it's kind of a frantic scene, and then we do get into, he comes in stabbing, and then there's a shotgun involved, and there's 3 or 4 shotgun blasts that result in a murder, And we've never seen something so explosively violent, I guess I would say, because of the nature of the shotgun, but also that he's just killing random people who are literally standing in line. And you kind of feel like in New York City, there's going to be cops coming. There's not a lot of cops in this movie, except when they need them, when the film needs them. But like he's walking around, stalking them quietly in the thing, and they're like trying not to crush the rappers. And then it turns into Ghostface, but he's got a gun, and he's not like. You remember the scene in the house in the first movie when he's like looking around and, movement acting, and he's like slinking into the next room. This is just him like walking around, looking around. It's got a different feel. And I liked it. I liked that it was a different thing from before. So yeah, I thought this was a super effective, fun scene.
Yeah, we've had a few. I mean, it's a good set piece, and it really, to me, it set itself apart. That I think this is probably one of the more effective scenes. So they're scared. The cops are contacting the sisters. They're like, "We found your ID at the murder of those two boys from the beginning of the movie," and they're like, "Oh no." You meet their roommates. You're meeting their characters. They have this whole conversation about the rules. We're in a franchise. That means anybody. And again, like I said, that just pissed me off because it was unnecessary and not clever. And again, it was like, you must use this to be a Scream movie. And you're like, I guess. Then we get this dope ladder scene. All right, so they're home. They're like, we're going to leave. And they're kind of, they're having like a little bit of a celebration. I don't know. They're having dinner together. They're having a moment of a win. Like they're happy about their resolve as a team. But across the way, there's this character, this boyfriend character. He sees Ghostface is in their roommate's room. The roommate's, she's boning away. And he sees Ghostface and he's screaming at the window. Nobody's listening to him. He's screaming at the roommate. She can't hear him. Ghostface sees him and he's like waving at him. He's screaming, trying to get somebody to hear him. He's trying to call his girlfriend. And like, it's a cool like rear window moment, right? Where it's like he sees the danger and nobody can hear him and nobody's picking up their phone. So then the people at the dinner table start hearing screaming and they're like, oh, it's just her roommate boning.
Which they've established that she's a bone freak.
Yeah. And
sex positive.
And they go to kick open the door and the door flies open and the roommate comes falling out, just blood all over the place. And there's Ghostface there. And it's a pretty good like cat and mouse running through the room. He's stabbing other roommates, stabbing their friends, cutting them up. And it's, blood all over the walls. They run into the bathroom and try to hide in there. And there's a cut up dead guy in the tub. And that's good stuff. Like, I like it when you run in a room, there's blood all over the walls and you're just like, you are fucked. And the boyfriend from across the way, he throws a ladder across. He's like, climb across. And I was like, oh, this isn't going to go well. I love it. This is great.
Oh, yeah. It was a really good idea.
Yeah. And so here's another really good set piece where they're trying to climb across the ladder. It reminds me of a cliffhanger. They're trying to climb across the ladder and they're up 5 or 6 stories. And of course, somebody's going to fall off and Ghostface is trying to bust in through the door that they've blockaded. It's a really effective scene. So again, this movie has several very effective, pretty bitchin' intense set pieces. It's good.
Yeah, I liked it. The one thing that I noticed here, and it does continue throughout the film, is a lot of people get stabbed and don't die. Like in the first couple movies, there's a couple times he slashes and someone gets a slash, like a red mark or a cut on them. But he plunges his knife into a girl's belly button. And I believe he might even pull it up. That might be later though. But like there's a couple times 2 people get stabbed and stabbed decent. One in the shoulder, but it's a stab. And the other one right in the stomach. But they don't die. They continue to run around the house. And that I don't recall that happening so many times in the other movies. And that happens a lot here. And it's not the last time that happens. It happens throughout the rest of this film as well. That's pretty interesting.
I don't know what the realism is. I know if you get stabbed in the gut, you can live,
right.
like stabbed, I know you can get, I've read stories where people got stabbed like 7 times with a kitchen knife and survived. because it hits bones and stuff, and you can be hurt really bad, internal bleeding, whatnot. It's not good, but like when a movie,
You heard it here first on the Launchpad podcast. Getting stabbed, not good.
not good. Sometimes I wonder if it's a movie's responsibility to say if you get stabbed, you can survive for 8 minutes. Like, if you're gonna break the movie rules and be realistic, like, do you have to explain that you're being realistic? Because, like you said, like that chick who gets stabbed in the gut on the subway and then she ends up being alive. I'm like, bullshit.
She
But, like,
also got stabbed in the shoulder. Same
in the
chick,
shoulder,
and she's
yeah.
still alive later.
And you're like, bullshit. But then it's like, well, wait, is that real? The movie should tell me.
See, it's funny you say that because lately I've heard and seen many movies that make a statement as truth. Like they say it as if it's a fact. And I'm like, oh, good to know. Like, it's almost like I can't think of a good example, even though I've seen a bunch lately. But like, it's almost like most shark attacks happen in just a foot of water. But they'll say, like, a movie will say, hey, like a character will be like, yeah, but did you know that most shark attacks happen in 1 foot of water? And they'll say that. And I'll be like, ooh, I need to remember that. And then I'm like, wait. I need to check a source first. Because I'm watching a fictional movie. Just because they said it in such a way that I'm believing it for the next 2 hours doesn't mean that that's the truth.
Yeah, right, exactly. Well, and it's like, I'm wondering, like, if an EMT at some point in this movie should just be like, well, she only got stabbed in the intestines, so you can survive 13 minutes with that. And it's like, oh, okay, that explains why this movie's doing this. Anyway, their roommate's dead. More people are dead. The cop who was on the case, it's his daughter who died. And he's like, you fuck with my family, you die. He's a really big overactor, but it fits, it's Scream.
The cop?
Yeah. He's a big overactor.
Get to that.
So then Hayden Panettiere shows up and she's like, hey, remember me? I'm an FBI agent now. And everybody's like, okay, I guess.
That's almost the exact reaction. There's one or two people who go, I guess. But yeah, everyone's just like, all right, fine.
They do some stuff and then Gail's like, guys, I found something. And they're like, how did you find this? She's like, because I'm a reporter. And they're like, okay.
Investigative reporter.
And they find this bitchin' like movie theater that's been transformed into a Ghostface museum full of like OG stuff from like the chair that the boyfriend was tied up in the first movie, the knives, the costumes, the masks. Pretty cool. For the sixth film in a franchise, I'm actually on board with this location and this setup. I think it's a cool place to have a fight. I think it's a cool thing to bring the nostalgia back. It worked for me. What do you think of museum? Do you think the Ghostface museum was cool?
Yes. To me, it's like, ugh. I mean, I start to be like, all right, so you're telling me that one psychopath kid who's really into all this was able to somehow procure. And then I'm like, dude, it's the sixth movie in a horror franchise. Who cares? It's cool. So it turns into like, for me, I can't help but like not be able to suspend my disbelief that hard. But then I like think and say to myself, dude, it's a fucking sixth movie in a slasher franchise. Just have fun with it. And I'm like, that's a fucking cool set piece, right? It's cool that we're in this movie theater now. There's a row of Ghostface costumes. There's masks. There's knives everywhere. It's like, okay, yeah, actually, you know what? That's pretty cool. I'm having fun with this. This is cool.
So then the Randy of this thing and the Hayden Panettiere of this thing, they're like, oh, I heard you like horror movies. Yeah. What's the best Nightmare on Elm Street scene? Part 1. And I'm like, wrong. Part 3.
I knew you were going to say that. I thought they was going to say part 3 or part 1. Like part 1, I was like, Rumi's not going to agree with that.
Wrong. I mean, it's fine, but it doesn't even know its own rules yet. I mean, fine. Okay. And then they're like, best Friday the 13th. And they were like, part 2.
She said part 2, and then the other girl said final Friday.
Yeah, you part 4.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the one with
Corey Feldman.
Corey Feldman.
On Corey Feldman.
Yeah, not a bad one. But the correct answer is part 6 because you get, hey, he's back. The man behind the mask. Come on. That alone, the soundtrack.
You get no
alone.
argument from me. 6 is probably my one single favorite.
And then they're like, best Candyman. I'm like, that's not even a franchise that people ask that question to. The first one is far superior to anything else that's been done. The new one was fine, but boring. So
Oh, see,
What?
I like their answer for that because that is the correct answer. It's
Both of them. But like, then they acted like respect. Like, who talks like this? Whoa.
It's true. You're right.
I mean, we do. We've did 5 years of a podcast of it, but like, I don't know. It just, again, I don't believe that those people have seen those movies, and I don't believe that they believe their answers. How about that?
Well, it also felt like very much. It just felt like I guess the best way to say it is if you think about storytelling, right? Whether it's a movie, a video game, a comic, there are beats you have to hit, right? You have to explain the characters. You have to show the problem. You have to show the encounter. You have to show a climax. You have to show the conclusion. I shouldn't see those. Those are underpinnings that you should then build on top of. And it just feels like, oh, we're going to make it so that these two characters have a conversation where we know, the audience knows that they both know the rules, they have a mutual respect for each other, and that they think they might trust each other. But like, you can't just have a conversation where you're like, hey, do you also know horror movies as well as me? Okay, then we will both be friends. Copy that. Like, that's not a scene. That's just literally the underpinnings. Like, that's the foundation. It's the Randy scene. It's the, hey, here's the rules. You don't need to tell me the fucking rules. Show me the rules. Show me them in action, in dialogue, in discussion.
You could have had Randy too be like, oh, this is like that thing in Nightmare on Elm Street.
Right.
And Hayden Panettiere could be like, oh, you like Nightmare of Elm Street? I've always been partial to part 3. Like, have her one up her in a conversation.
Correct.
Don't just have them be like, we need to sit here and ask each other questions now. Here is the things we must do to get to the next scene.
Right.
Like, yeah, you're right. Again, you're hitting the beats because you feel like you have to, not making a movie because that's how movies work.
Yeah, it's like if you think of a house, right? The first thing I guess you pour the foundation first, then you put up the framework, then you put up the walls, then you put up the siding. Siding is a polished script. If I could still see the lumber, the framework of the house, you did a shitty job writing that house, right?
Yeah. Well, to be fair, they're like, we didn't think you were going to film inside.
But like, that's what it is, right? You shouldn't, if I'm watching your movie, I shouldn't see the underpinnings. I shouldn't see the structure, your storytelling structure. You know? It's like having a person saying like, well, this is the climax of our evening, so we must get ready for battle with the bad guy. You're like, dude, you're reading to me how to write a script.
In 10 more pages, we need to be into the darkest night of our soul, and I forgot to save the cat, so I will go pick those things up.
That girl says that a lot. The Randy girl is like, you're number 1 on my list. He's number 1 on everybody's list. Nobody knows where this guy has been the whole movie. We don't trust him. We get it. You don't need to keep
she's such a dick
pointing it out that there's a list.
We have this cool I don't know where it happens, but the subway scene happens a little bit later. We get the Gale scene. So they tried to do this human bait thing in the park, and it doesn't go right. And Ghostface is like, haha, I'm looking at Gale Weathers, and like, oh no, Gale Weathers' boyfriend that we never met dies. And you're like, oh, well, I guess there's another body. All right, cool.
The best
sorry,
is
dude.
Gale doesn't even care. She goes, Ghostface is like, he goes, all those muscles didn't help much. Gale goes, guess not. Okay, don't cry too hard, Gale.
Yeah, don't. It's not even named. She's not even like, oh no,
you should hear Ricky. You know, it's a fine little. He chases her around a bit. She locks him out. She gets a gun, and she immediately shoots through the door. And then she's still talking to Roger Jackson on the phone, which is funny because like she's talking to him like that's him. Number one, she's been in 5 of these movies already, so she knows there's 2 of them, and there's no way that the other Ghostface on the other side of the door, who's just been shot at, is talking on a phone. It's clearly someone else somewhere else. But she talks to him anyway, and she shoots a couple more times, and then she goes out there and tries to find him, and he's not there. He gets the drop on her and stabs her really good, right?
Real good, yeah. And then the 2 heroes show up at the last minute, and then the paramedics come in and save her. 1, paramedics don't enter a scene unless the cops have shown up and cleared it if there's like a rampaging stabber on the loose. So she would have bled to death in reality. Like that's what would have happened because the cops would have come in and wasted a whole bunch of time before the paramedics could show up because that's what happens in real life. But this is a movie. So they're
This
like,
movie
okay,
also has numerous times where, especially those two girls, but characters are in a violent, what the fuck is happening scene, and the cops run in with their guns, and the girls just walk towards the cops, and the cops don't even acknowledge the girls. Like, if you were in a room where a stabbing just happened and cops were running towards you, what would be the first thing you would do?
get shot.
Put your I would put my hands up immediately.
I would lie down on the floor. Yeah.
Right. I also think the cops would yell out, freeze, put your hands up. Because every cop going to that scene, like, you think that police captain guy was like, all right, there might be two young girls there. If they look sort of similar and have dark hair, they're probably the good guys, but we're not sure.
Also, those
they're
chicks,
literally looking for a person with a scream mask. That's the only person they're going to shoot.
two people of suspect, women of suspect from the first murder of the movie are keep showing up at crime scenes. They would be arrested. They would be in jail.
That's not how it works.
Yeah, they would be under surveillance 24/7. They would have ankle bracelets on. Anyway. So then we have this cool subway scene, and it's a good subway scene. You know, it's Halloween in New York on the subway, so you get a bunch of like costumed people. There's a pinhead. You see
a bunch of ghost faces.
A bunch of ghost faces, and the lights keep flickering as they go through parts of the subway. It's a good scene. It's effective. It kind of reminded me of the Predator scene from Predator 2 on the subway in LA.
That would have been a good costume to have.
Yeah.
Right? 'Cause they were definitely doing like other Universal properties. I get it, but that would have been cool if there was a Predator 2 in there. Or at least a Bill Paxton.
Yeah. I thought that scene was really effective. Again, a good set piece for a movie that need, like the smart set pieces for a movie that needed more help. So I thought this was a good scene to keep things going. They get to, one of the people gets stabbed. The Randy gets stabbed. They get to the movie theater. They've turned it into a trap. Of course, it doesn't work like that, and the ghost faces are already there. Turns out there's 3 ghost faces.
Well, there was a red herring where they say it's Hayden Panettiere. Yeah. And you're like, oh, I suspected her from the beginning. But then I'm like, first of all, in the scene right before they make her look bad, someone punches a ghost. The boy, Randy, punches a ghost face in the face hard, takes Ghostface right off their feet. And I'm like, okay, whoever shows up with a giant black eye has got to be Ghostface because he fucking walloped them. And I'm almost like, Hayden Panettiere in the movie and in real life seems like she's like a little like bite-sized little girl. And I'm like, you can't have a child playing Ghostface because the height differential would be so huge. And I was like, that's not like, I'm just imagining like 6 foot tall Ghostface walks in, pulls the mask off, and then we see in the wide it's little 3'7" Hayden Panettiere, and she's got no mask on with the hood. But it was a good red herring. I don't know if I believed it, but I was definitely like, oh, it was her, because the cop who's the overacting cop is like, Hayden Panettiere, we called her FBI, and her FBI says she's got fired a while ago because she's mentally unstable. Everyone's like, oh no.
Oh no, yeah. So there's 2 Ghostface and a cop now, and it turns out they're his kids, and the roommate, the sex positive roommate, not dead. It was a trick. And he orchestrated it as a cop. He made that work. And I'm like, he must have paid off a lot of people. Where'd you get a body to switch out? Like,
he just said you could switch out a body. He just verbalized that. But also with the sex positive roommate, if the sex positive roommate was having positive sex and the guy across the alley was watching her and saw a ghost face in the room, that means either dad or brother was in the room with sex positive get boned. I just realized when you were explaining that scene, I just realized like that means the other ghost face in her was a blood relative.
Now, Kate is she caught on. She was smarter than Scream 6 because she was like, we've seen him stab everybody else. We did not see him stab the roommate. I was like, I mean, she was covered in blood. She's dead. Like her dad's sad. Look. And she's like, yeah, but if you don't see him stab them, then I don't think he stabs them. And I was like, no, I didn't buy it. She was right. She called it, and I was wrong.
She might be short, but she's smart.
So then Cop takes a Matthew Lillard page from the Matthew Lillard book of acting, and he starts overacting the shit out of the scene. He's
But
like,
he takes like a Matthew Lillard page and then hits it with gamma radiation, and he's just twirling his mustache. You killed my son, and now I'm evil, and my children are also, and then they're twirling their little mustaches. Yes, Daddy. Yes. I hate that. I hate that.
here's let me just cut to the chase. They defeat them because that's what happens in Scream movies. One of the guys gets his head smashed in with the Randy TV from the original movie. Okay, fine. Here's what I want the ending to be.
Okay, fine.
Here's what I want. Here's my pitch.
Mm-hmm.
Because the whole movie is about the sister being a killer and this whole thing about the internet believing that she's a killer. My pitch for the final scene is Halloween night in New York, in Central Park, tons of people everywhere, lots of people in Ghostface costumes, and the killers have left out Ghostface masks and left out knives and been like, that chick that you all hate, she's in Central Park. Somebody take her out.
Wait, say that to who?
Puts it out on the internet. Puts it out
so like
in the public.
the knives and shit are just like in Central Park or something?
Just in Central Park. She basically gets warriored where Ghostface puts out a message over the internet that's like, Sam, that murderer, she's here and you all know what to do. So now all these people are dressed as Ghostface, and you have to she has to decide, is a random person going to come up and try and stab me? Do I just have to start stabbing random motherfuckers? Like, that would really put into question the internet truther idea that they put forward. Take it to its logical thing, because that's where we're headed. Like, literally, we are any day now. Somebody's going to be on the internet and be like, I dare you to take out X politician, Y politician. Like, we're that close to the internet turning into just some shooting board job site. I think if that movie went that direction, it would have been way darker and way more compelling to, is she a murderer? Is she going to have to start murdering like 8 or 9 people who are going to come for her? Like, that'd be fucked up. Put a target on her back in the middle of New York on Halloween Eve. Like, what? That would be nuts to me. And I think that would have really put forth the, what I think this was trying to say about the internet, but didn't touch.
So what I would do, I thought they were going to go something close to this, was when I think the last of the killers to be alive is the dad, the cop.
Yeah.
She has a fight with him and he's at her mercy. And she says something like, I'm not a killer. She takes a step back and then she looks at her sister and she thinks about it and she goes, but you did fuck with my family. And she stabs him in the eye, which
good.
Pretty baller. But I thought they were going to have her be like, no, I'm not a killer. I'm not going to perpetuate the cycle, and that he was going to have to face justice. If you do that, you set yourself up for the sequel because one of the killers is still alive. I think that makes sense, and that would have been good for her character because, no, I'm not a killer. I don't really care. It's the 6th movie in a fucking Scream franchise, and I was not invested. Like, I was not rooting for any of these characters or anything like that from the get-go or throughout the film. At that point, it didn't matter. Like, she could have pulled out an Uzi and just like, fine. I would have been like, no, I don't care. Fine.
She's just like, you're wrong about me. I'm not a killer. I'm actually an arsonist, and just lights the place on fire and walks out. Little bit of a firebug.
It was, it's fine. And then everyone in the core 4 is still alive at the end. The 2 Randys are alive. The 2 girls are alive. Whatever.
All right, fine.
Oh,
and
that's
the boyfriend.
The boyfriend from across the alley.
I like him.
He was a good red herring because they told us, like, I feel like we knew him as the audience. We knew him and knew about him just enough to make him a good potential suspect. Yeah. But at the same point, you don't know anything about him, so you don't really care about him. You're not really invested in their relationship. Whereas, like, during the different times, like, Sydney blames, was it Billy? In the first movie, in school, and she runs away from him, and you kind of feel bad for him. And then later on, they make up, and you feel happy for them, at least ostensibly. Then at the end, when he is the killer, you feel bad for her because of that back and forth. In this, you don't feel anything with anything because you don't care about. I didn't care about the girl, but you definitely
Yep.
don't care about the guy because you don't know anything about him.
Well, he's in a show that I like called The Other Two, and he plays a doofy boyfriend, but he's like goofy in that TV show. In this, he's like more serious, but I like him as an actor. He's good.
Well, something that I can't stand with this, and I can't stand it with every single Marvel
Can't
movie.
stand it.
Every single character is a quippy little Spider-Man. And I hate it in the Marvel movies because Spider-Man should sound like Spider-Man. Every other character should be a different character. Except they all say the same type of jokes, the same sense of humor in every situation. It shouldn't be like that. Like Spider-Man, I don't know in what movie because they're all the same movie. In one of those movies, he goes, "Oh, we're using our fake names or our superhero names." That should be Spider-Man. Captain America shouldn't say that. Iron Man shouldn't say that. Doctor Strange shouldn't say that. If everybody talks like that, they're all the same. In this movie, when they did Core 4, she's like, "I'm not saying that. I'm not saying that either." Up top, Core 4, not doing it. Nope, not doing it. Core 4, you do it. It's four people. Three of them are saying the same exact thing. On the script, you wouldn't know who was saying it by the words, by the dialogue, because it's written for the same person. They just all keep doing it. And when I watched it this time, I remembered hating that in the first and in the last movie, too, Scream 5, specifically those sisters and specifically Wednesday. She has a great delivery and a great jokey delivery. But in those scenes, everybody else is doing it. Everybody's talking to everybody the same way. Whereas
That's when a script doesn't know how to write for the voices that they're in. That was they wrote a funny gimmick and then just didn't.
Think of the first movie, right? At any given point, you have Stu, who was a little uncouth, not reading the room. He loved Tatum, or, at least ostensibly loved Tatum. And he was a goofy guy. You have Billy, who was the bad boy who's trying to fit in with everybody and was being cool. You have Randy, who's just a fucking weird social guy and obviously likes horror movies. Sydney is the final girl, the regular girl, and Tatum is the slut. And they, to the sex positive one. They all talked in any given situation. They all played like those characters. When they were talking about the party, Tatum was really interested in the party. Billy said he would go, or Stu said he would go. They were different people, but
it's finding your voice. That's how it's a sign of I don't know if it's weak script writing or just like on the day they thought that was a funny thing. Like they just ad-libbed it, and that's why it's all goofy.
And like like that scene played, but it sounds like Wednesday could have been every one of those characters, and it would just the way she was talking. And I do feel that way with the Marvel movies. It's like if you take an Iron Man movie, I know he's in an iron suit and he's fighting Iron Man bad guys, but all of his dialogue could be Spider-Man dialogue. When you take Doctor Strange, and you take all the mystical elements out, but just look at his dialogue, it's all Spider-Man dialogue. And
they found out that humor works really well.
It's funny. It does work, and that's why everyone likes it. That's why they use it. But I don't want to watch all of my favorite thing
all at once, all the time. Everything all at once, everywhere. So where does the franchise go from here, Matt? Where does it go? What do we do? What's Scream 7?
Oof. I have an idea, but I feel like we should do a whole episode about it.
Really? Because I'm thinking we should do a whole episode too. I think it's time to take this bad boy to space, baby.
I was going to say, my idea is Scream 7 would be out of this world, if you catch my drift.
I think we should blast this thing off to another iteration of this franchise.
I think we should get someone involved with the franchise's production involved in our next episode. I think we should get someone from Woodsboro to join us.
You want to get the voice of Scream to join us on the next episode to talk about Scream in space?
Yeah. Join us next week.
Join us next week, Roger L. Jackson on the Launchpad podcast to talk Scream 7 in space. Yeah, man, I'm super pumped about this. We've had this idea forever. We've been trying to make this happen forever, and now it's going to happen. Roger L. Jackson, the voice of Ghostface, will be on the Launchpad podcast once again, talking Scream with us in space. I can't believe how cool we are.
Yeah, we it is watching fucking Scream 6 the other night and listening to Roger Jackson. I was like, just talking to that guy on the phone the other day, and it's like surreal, right?
It's absolutely surreal.
When I was on I Am Legend, there was a night where I spent a good chunk of the night in Will Smith's trailer fitting him for an appliance. So like shooting the shit, being professional, putting shit on his underwear. And literally he was standing there in boxer briefs and I'm kneeling down, putting something on his thigh. And then that night I went back to my hotel room and the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air was on. And it was like this weird feedback loop of like the whole time I was in his trailer working with him, I didn't have like, I wasn't starstruck or anything like that. I didn't have that. But just to then see him 15 years ago on television was this weird, like, he was there.
It helps when they're cool.
For sure.
I've also had that thing where you're watching something on television and you see somebody come on, you're like, that person's a pain in the ass.
Dick. Yeah. Yeah, I have too. Yeah. I mean, like, I wonder how many people she bitched at walking to set. You know?
Yeah. I wonder what shitty coffee order they were forcing the PAs to go all over town to get the. Yeah. Like there's times you're like, man, that's cool to see that person on TV. They're fun to work with. And then there's like, that person sucks.
I know that motherfucker missed his mark like 4 times before they got this thing.
I can tell just by looking at it that they didn't memorize their line and they're just flubbing their way through it. You can look like even in the edit, you can see on their co-star face that they're just like, motherfucker didn't even learn their lines. Ah!
You know what I like to do too when I watch movies that I was on set for? I like to be like, I was just on the other side of that door because I had a blood rig or something, or I was literally under the piano for that shot, you know?
Yeah. I unfortunately say that shit out loud, and everybody who I watch movies with is like, shut the fuck up.
I know, man. You're in the industry.
Yeah, they're like, I found a turtle right over there, and I caught a butterfly on that field.
That might be one of the most Ruby things I've ever heard you say. I found a turtle right over there.
No, there's a movie that I made in high school, a Vietnam film that is terrible but kind of funny. And every time we watch it, my dad would be like, "Oh, right over there around the bend, I caught a turtle."
That is probably like the most dad situation, right?
Yeah,
to repeat that lame ass part of the story. Sorry, Mr. Aaron, but that lame part of the story every time you watch that Vietnam movie. I also love the idea that you guys keep doing that, like every Christmas or something.
Every day, yeah, that was when we break out tags. Oh my god, it's like when you watch a movie, like you just look to the people who worked on it, you're like, how were the bugs that night?
Yeah.
How late did you go? Was that a 14-hour? Tell me about your 4-banger. How was the honey wagon? Was it overflowing or was it pretty good?
Did you have a C-47 holding up that gel?
What was Crafty like that night? Oh,
is anybody still listening?
Anyway, we have digressed. But yeah, next week, Roger L. Jackson on the show. Rumi, let's blast this thing off. Taking the franchise to space.
See you guys in space.
Rocketeers. We are out.
Ignition sequence start. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. All engine running. Liftoff. We have a liftoff.